this lesson, we will review basic structural notions when working on any project. We are indeed in my workshop and surrounded by other workshops. I hope that the ambient sounds do not distract you. First, I should say that the structural aspect is for me one of the most important. I dare say more than the functional and of course more than aesthetics. Somehow the purpose of all pieces of furniture is to hold objects, be it a book, your computer, or yourself in a bed or a chair. So maintaining structural unity is key. We could even say that it could be poorly designed in functional terms or be ugly, but we could use it with another function. And a table that is very low would become a side table. But without structural unity, it's a disaster. That is why we put it first. Ideally, this concept or this way of working the structure should go hand in hand with design and not be a later stage, a patch that we would add when we have a nice piece of furniture. In structural terms, you have to think that static loads are relatively simple to solve. What do I mean by static load? Somehow we might think that this is a stool. Static loads are vertical stresses, the own weight of the furniture and of the objects that we put on it. This works in those terms, only in static load. It doesn't tumble down. The problem is horizontal loads, horizontal forces. Somehow what we deal with as carpenters in structural terms is related to those forces. Chile is a seismic country, and here horizontal forces are part of the norm and part of any construction. Solving these forces is not that complex, but we need some basic notions. The first thing to understand is that in structural terms, the triangle is key. A triangle is defined by its sides. What does this mean? If I want to deform it, that is, if I want to change any of its angles, I would have to modify one of its sides. A concrete example. If I form a triangle, I cannot modify the situation. I cannot deform it, although the joint is easily disassembled. There is no glue, but it is undeformable because I insist if I want to modify the angles, that is, to deform the triangle, I need to break one of these pieces. That is exceptional to the triangle, and it's widely used in demanding structures, such as railway bridges, electric pylons, and the Eiffel Tower. All are a set of triangles on triangles. This does not happen with other polygons. For example, a square or a pentagon or any other, because the shape of the square is no longer defined by the size of its sides. So I can deform it. I can change its angles without changing the size of its sides. Therefore, it is deformable without breaking it to become a rhombus. It simply deforms. To ensure that in these cases the figure does not deform, we can proceed in two ways. The first case, and one of the most complex, is to generate rigid unions. In cabinet making, it is called jointing. This would be similar to the frame of a chair. Let's imagine a chair like this, with the square here. Where do bad chairs fail? Here, because so that the chair does not deform, that joint must be rigid. So all the jointing work in a chair has to do with trying to avoid this movement. It is even more complex when it doesn't have this crosspiece. And the legs now. We will draw another chair. They are more likely to deform along two axes. If you look at tables, we have some where the legs are angled. The lower part of the leg is very narrow, but it widens upwards to have a larger gluing surface and a more rigid joint. This is the most complex way to solve the issue. This is why chairs and tables are challenging projects, especially chairs, because a person will sit on it and move it. The other way to ensure that these figures don't deform is by triangulation. What does this mean? For example, putting a diagonal batten. What I did was transform the square or any polygon into a set of triangles. The structure will no longer move just by adding this diagonal, by transforming the square into two triangles. A clear example of this solution is scaffolding. Scaffolds are two vertical elements joined with two horizontal elements just superimposed. And of course, it's two diagonals. This transforms the structural unit of the scaffold completely. And they are stacked to build tall buildings with structures that are only supported and connected in a mobile way, but braced. That is the concept, using diagonals. The most traditional way to solve this triangulation is not with diagonals. In cabinet making, we use panels. The panel is itself an undeformable figure. And I could use it, for example, in this way. By adding a panel, this square becomes undeformable. It is the same phenomenon of cardboard boxes that are completely collapsible. But when you close the back and front flaps, you transform that face into a panel. And that affords structural unity, so that hundreds can be stacked. What we are talking about is a box-tight model with its four defined perimeters, and the rear panel gives it structural unity. Understanding these notions that may seem somewhat abstract, the idea is that you see why one ends up hating retail furniture. Think of a wardrobe, this structure that wobbles like jelly and fails. They are made of chipboard panels, a material that can be easily ground and connected with metallic elements. And they delegate on you the ability to put it together. There are no clamps or glue, so they are relatively fragile structures. And the only way to stiffen it is with the back panel, the weakest element in the structure. Notice that it is a 3mm board with very weak points. I'd call it planned obsolescence. It's designed to fail because the rear panel soon collapses because you pushed it. If that model of furniture allows a little movement, it will increase because the metallic element will begin to grind and grind the material. If there is some play, a year later it will be worse, and this piece that is key to maintaining the structural unity is precisely the worst resolved. Understanding this situation, I want you to imagine that there are two large structural groups in furniture. Furniture based on a framework, for example, chairs, tables, desks, or any structure resolved with slender elements, where its structural unity will depend on the rigidity of its joints. In essence, we delegate structural unity onto these joints. On the other hand, we have panel-based furniture, which is the most common: drawers, desks, shelves, and are the easiest to solve. We will start with this group in the course because we can have structural unity in a simpler way. To bring this abstract idea to concrete objects, I want to show you the case of Enzo Mari. Enzo Mari is a well-known Italian designer, and this book in particular is very famous. Industrial designers know it. It is fashionable. The thing is that Enzo Mari publishes this book out of boredom with the frivolity of his commissions and says, "I will produce material for anyone to build their own furniture," basically democratizing access to furniture. I'll show you a bit of the book. Look, the idea is to look at it with different eyes based on the structural principles that we reviewed. So Enzo Mari's work was designed, as I said, for everyone to build it with basic tools. So if you look at the design of this table, which is a classic of his, it is solved based on triangles. The triangle is present in all the projects. The legs of this other table are triangular. In this one, each of those tables are small panels that triangulate each of those joints. Another table forms a triangle here, this other plane, another triangle, and between them, two triangles. What Enzo Mari proposes with these designs is not a design issue, it is structural. What he says is that if anyone can build this, the joints they make will probably not be the most rigid. They are not complex sockets like we mentioned earlier. They will be joints with one or two nails. If the joints are not rigid, there must be another element to stiffen, and these are the diagonals. For example, this bed is resolved in the same way as a scaffold. The front panel and the rear panel are diagonalized on that axis, and between them appears this diagonal that diagonalizes the other axis. The same with this bed and this other bed. So that aggressive look has to do with the fact that the design is devised from a structural perspective. Diagonals appear on that axis on a shelf, and also on the other. So he assumes that the joints will be weak and that we must resolve structural units in another way. In fact, the Enzo Marie chair, this, which is a classic, is solved with panels. Contrary to the standard chair with a framework structure, this is almost a box with legs. Because again, he is saying the complexity of a chair is such, horizontal forces are such, that the simplest way to solve it is as a box. With these structural aspects, next we will see the functional aspects.